Hello everyone, this is the 9th chapter of the Simple Motion Graphics series. In this video, we are going to create this kind of motion graphics using the geometry nodes. So let's get started. So first we're going to add our host object. So let's call this disks animation. Okay, so we have this. Next we're going to add the geometry nodes modifier to this. And then we're going to delete this. First we're going to create the circle, the curve circle. Let me increase its resolution, something like that. After that, we're going to convert this into instance because that is really handy to work. Okay, so basically we have this base circle, and suppose we have this the next circle, and that we want to add on the circumference of this circle, something like this, say. Okay, in the next step we're going to add another circle somewhere here on the circumference of this circle. So this is the process. So for this process we need a circle that has its origin on its circumference, something like here. Okay, and next we're going to duplicate this node, the curve circle. So we have this circle, then we're going to add the set position node, and if we add a value node here and plug this radius to the xyz node and then to this offset, we have this circle that has origin at this point. So now we can easily instance this circle on the base circle. So let me create a group for this. So let me go outside this. So this is our offset circle. So if we increase the radius, we have something like this. Okay, so next we're going to repeatedly instance this circle on the circumference of the base circles. So first I'll show you the single step, and then we will use the repeat zone node to add multiple circles. Okay, so first we need to realize this, and then we can add the sample curve node. So this node provides the position, tangent and normal on this circle based on this vector. So what we can do, we can add the point node. We can plug this position to this position, and if we combine this point with the circle, so we have something like this. And if we change the factor, see this point stay on the circle. So next we're going to add the instance on points node, and then we're going to instance this offset circle, something like this. And next we need to align this circle properly, that we have instance. So we can add the align to vector node, and if I plug this to this, we have this, and let me select this option, the Y. So we have this, but we want this circle to be inside this circle, so we need to flip this tangent. We can add the vector scale node and make this scale negative. Now that circle is inside this, and now if I decrease the radius, see we have that circle. And if we change the factor, see it is rotating inside this circle. So basically now we have to repeat this process for this new circle. Okay, so for that we're going to use the repeat zone node. So let me add the repeat zone node. So let me disconnect that, plug this to this, and also disconnect that and plug that to this. And for this we also need to plug that here and use that to realize that. Okay, and then add this circle based on this position, and then join that with the existing circle, something like that. See, we have this. But as I said, for the next step we need this circle, the newly created, to add the another circle. So we also need to plug this to this. Now if I increase the iterations, we have the third circle, but that is not visible because it has the same radius. Now let's change the radius. So let me add the integer node. So this is the iteration number, or you can call this as iteration index. So that start from 0. So we can use that with the map range node to change the radius. So here we need to define the maximum number of iterations. We can plug that here. And now if we plug that to this, so we have this. So for the first iteration, we want the radius to be high, like 0.8. But as the number of iteration increase, we want the radius should decrease around 0.1. Now if I increase the number of iterations, we have this. Now you can add as many circles as you want. Stick this to 6, and here you can change the base radius, something like that. So now our main setup is ready. Now let's animate this. So here we can add the map range node. So here we can connect the frame node, and we can define the frame number from first, let's say around 240. And let me also change the timeline range to 240. So now we have this kind of motion. See, it is looping and it has really nice this spiral motion. So next we're going to convert this to mesh so that we can add the texture. So let's first offset this along the z-axis. So we're going to create a mask. So let me add the index node. So now, so if we visualize this index, let me change that to instance because these are the instances. Okay, so we have 7 instances, 6 from this iteration and 1 from that we have input. So we have this index. Let me enable the text info, and if we also enable the attribute text, see, we can see the index number of these instances. So we can add the map range node here. So here we can define the maximum index, that is 6. Okay, let me show you this. So that is 6. So that is basically our number of iterations. We can plug that here, something like that. So now we have this gradient for these instances. We can also store that because we want to use that for the material. So let me call this mask and change the domain to instance. Okay, so we have this. So next we can add the set position node. Then we can add the XYZ combine node. After that, we can add the multiply node so that we can control the offset. And here we can add the mask. So this mask or this gradient. So now we have this kind of offset. Okay. And next we're going to add the fill curve node. Convert this curve to mesh, something like this. We can also change that to n-gons. So we have these disks, and next we're going to also store the UV map for this. So we're going to use the noise texture, so that will be handy for us. Change that to vector, this to face corner, and here we can use the position as a UV map. Okay, we have this, and next we can realize this because we're going to add the modifier to this. So we need the real geometry. Then we can also add the set shade smooth, and then we can also add the set material. So let me add the modifier to this. So first we're going to add the solidify modifier. So let me increase this, and then we can add the bevel to this. And after that you can also add this weighted normal to get the flat surface look. So let me disable that for the moment because it is a bit heavy. And another thing is that I want to add the connection points for these circles. For this circle, the first one here and the second one here. Okay, so we can use these instances. We can convert that to points. So we have these points. Then we can add the instance on points node, and here you can instance the connection point, maybe a cylinder or a sphere. I'm going to use the icosphere because I'm going to render this from the top, so that doesn't matter. We can add this, then we can add the set shade smooth node, and we can decrease its scale, something like 0.025. And let me also combine that with this. See, now we have these spheres. We can also add the material to this. Let me even decrease this radius, maybe 0.015, something like that. So now we have this. Okay, so now our setup is ready. Next we're going to add the material and lighting. So let me first quickly add the materials. This is for the discs, and let me add another one that is for the sphere. So we can select that. This is for the spheres and this is for the discs. So let me go to the top mode. So for the sphere, I'm going to make this metallic silver color and maybe even dark, something like that. And let me also switch that to cycles. So we have this, and for the disk, we're going to use that gradient. Let me add the attribute node, type here mask. Let me connect that. So we have this, and then we can add the ramp node, and we can plug that here. So we have this, and let me decrease this white color, something like that. After that, we can also add the bump based on the noise texture. So let me add that here, delete this, and here we can add the Voronoi noise. So because we are using this UV that is not visible, let me duplicate this node, type here UV map. We have that, we can plug that here. So we have this noise. Let me increase its scale, maybe around 120. Okay, we can plug that to the height. So we have this kind of surface. Let me increase this even 150. Let me try this 0.5 and 200. Yeah, something like that. So we have this, and what we can do, we can also decrease the lighting from this HDR image. So that is the same we are using for the previous chapters. So we can decrease this around 0.25, and you can also decrease the saturation around 0.5. And next we're going to add the background plane and the lighting. So let me add the plane and move that down to avoid the intersection, something like that. And then we can also align the camera. So now we have the camera. So next we're going to add the area light. We move that up. Then we're going to move that to the side somewhere here. Move that up. And we're going to change that to ellipse. Okay, let me increase the size and also increase the strength 50. And we can use the second area light to highlight these circles. And next we can add another area light with the disk option. We can put that between this circle and this background plane somewhere here. So let me increase its radius, something like that. Let me increase the strength around 50, even higher, maybe 100. So now if I change the color to like warm color, so we have something like this effect. And next we're going to add more details to this plane. So let me add the material to the background plane. We're going to add the noise texture to this. Let me delete this, then add the noise texture. So let me increase this to 6 and increase the details around maybe 10. Something like that. We can add the ramp node and we can plug that to this. So we have this. Okay, something like that. We can duplicate this noise, then we can add the ramp node, and after that we can add the bump node. Connect this to height and plug that to the normal. And let me decrease the scale maybe around 5. So we have this. Let me also decrease this details to 6 and increase this to around 0.55. And let me increase this. And now we can make some of these areas flat, something like that. We can invert this. Let me make this 1. Let me decrease the scale. Okay, I like this. So we have this. I think we should increase the spotlight strength because this is not visible properly. Maybe even higher, 50. See, we have this shadow, and we can also increase the radius of the light so that we have soft shadows. See, we have this motion graphics. So this is how you can easily create amazing motion graphics using the geometry nodes. So this is it. I hope you learned something from this video. You can get the project file and pre-access the remaining chapter from my Patreon page. So thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Happy noding. Bye.